Sometimes I don't actually know. Sometimes I'm a bit rolling the dice. I mean, I'll take Jordan and Egypt, right? And so something in me said, okay, get on the plane, go to Jordan, because I think this is your moment. You're in this part of the world, and let's go. This has been on your bucket list. Let's go. And I have to tell you, there was a part of me that was a little afraid, like, all right, are you sure? Maybe you should go home. Like, this is a major virus outbreak. People are freaking out. Maybe you should go home.
Welcome to More Business, More Life podcast. And today I have Jill Lublin with me, and we're going to talk about the amazing journey of life from, where she didn't know what choices she had, even some uncomfort and sadness and things that were going on in her life, to be able to have the life she wants, be able to travel the world, work with Publicity, help many of her clients, and most importantly, helping herself in a way, but not selfish, helping herself in a way so that she can help others. And if we're going to really dissect that, how do you take care of you while you're helping other people and ultimately the world? So it's going to be a beautiful conversation. Thanks for being here, Jill.
I'm delighted to be here. Thank you, Steve.
What prompted us to have this discussion, have you on the show, was just, talking about more business, more life, which is obviously the title of the show and what we talk about here. And, how I think you've done a little bit of both. And what I mean by both is that you've been doing this for yourself, but then you also even help your clients with some of these things that can help improve their businesses while they're starting to live more of the life that they want. But primarily, let's start with you. Like, how did it come that you've been able to travel now and speak and teach and do all the good things that you're doing, but well enjoying the life that you choose?
Thank you. Well, a couple things. It's funny, as the virus hit, COVID-19, I was actually in Egypt, speaking at a women's forum and touring around Egypt. And then I went on to Jordan because, hey, I couldn't get quite home yet. So what the heck? I might as well have more fun, right?
Right.
So I think this is the piece of what I think is so important in life is adaptability and flexibility. Because for me, I want that in my life. So even the fact, and the toughest time we've been having with COVID-19 and all the travel restrictions were coming down. And I found that, okay, well, I couldn't go visit the ancient temples in Egypt. So what else am I going to do? I'm going to do one other thing on my bucket list. I'm going to go to Petra, Jordan, which
Wow.
was on my bucket list, and and do that because, hey, they only had one confirmed case. That's better, right? But I think that's a piece of it, is that I don't let fear take me down. And that I'm always looking at, what's possible. And that's in my business, that's in my traveling, that's in my life in general, that I'm looking at possibilities, not what the rules are even necessarily, or, just different things that I think are so key in life. Is the first question is, what's most important, right? To me,
Yeah.
What are my values? Freedom, flexibility, those are my values. And I get to do that in my life and have the life I want. And, not every minute, of course, I have structures, responsibilities, but I find, interestingly enough, that the structure is actually what allows me the freedom. And so if you look at my schedule, it's really structured, including in this time, right now, it's structured. And I have a lot of also freedom in that, meaning in that there's also things that I want to do. There's dance class at 9, there's meditation, there's time with me, just with me, and doing whatever I want, self-care time, different things. So I think the most important thing is decide what's important to you and then start working your life around that.
That's you nailed some things that I often say. Design your life and then build your business or career around that, and then also structured freedom. It sounds like an oxymoron, but the reality is I found the same thing, Jill, is that it really does give me my life and the space that I want. Then we can plan the fun inside of our life. I want to go back to something you said. So there you are, you're out of the country, COVID-19 is happening, shutdown is happening. And then instead of going with, jumping into the fear of it, you quickly made a decision. Well, what else can I do? Oh, this might be better. They only have one case there. So, and you brought that up, that you don't let fear, run you. You take this way. I guess, what did it go like right away? Like, were you like, was there not an instance, or did you think, what should I do, and then made that decision, or has it been such a habit now that it was like instantaneous for you to like just look for what's next, just to slow
So
down that moment?
yeah, thank you. Well, a couple things. One is I was in a beautiful, very enlarged environment, meaning there were like 500 people at this conference, really in the middle of the start of the breakout of the conference, right? We're at this beautiful Ritz-Carlton in Cairo, Egypt. I'm speaking, I'm creating relationships. And then what was interesting is that I was actually supposed to go to the London Book Fair because I help self-published authors get foreign rights deals. That's one of the things I do. So I'm supposed to be going to the London Book Fair after Egypt. Well, that was canceled actually while I was in Egypt with very little warning. So you ask, well, was this instantaneous? Let me say that I went through five reiterations of what the trip could possibly be next.
Wow.
And part of that, my first choice was, well, I'm in Egypt. Let's go to the ancient temples. Let's go see these beautiful places I've always wanted to see. And I actually had the whole thing planned. I mean, spent hours on it, working with it with a travel agent in Egypt that I had met. And then she called me and she said, I hate to tell you this, but there's been an outbreak down there and I don't think you should go. I'm like, okay. And then funny enough, I was going to go overland because that was only on the cruise ships that had happened. So next I'm going to go overland. Okay. And then my travel agent America said, I don't know, that's such a great idea, blah, blah. And then we took my same trip and I thought, well, I'm in this part of the world. I've always wanted to go to Petra, Jordan, and literally ended up going there because we took all, the logistics of what I had. My plane fare matched it exactly. And off I went to Petra, Jordan. And you know what? That, funny enough, because we were in the middle of all this craziness, we could not get a hold of a travel agent in Jordan to help organize this trip to the holy sites and to go to Petra and all this stuff. So we organized one person to pick me up at the airport. And that was all we could do on such short notice. That one gentleman, of course, what happened? He helped plan the rest of the trip. And so part of that was flexibility, adaptability. Part of it was faith and patience. Part of that was jumping into the unknown and knowing that if I landed in Jordan and couldn't figure out where to go next, I knew somehow that I would figure it out, right? And I knew that something would work out because I've traveled enough that I know that. And I don't know that most people would have done that, landing in Jordan without anything known next. And the reality was that I actually had 2 tours to pick from because, people were so hungry for business because of obvious reasons, because of the virus. So, there's a great saying, blessed are the flexibility so that they shall not be broken, right? And I think flexibility is so key. So because I was flexible, I was able to do what I wanted to do. And I will tell you, were there moments of fear. When I was in Jordan and I heard a televised, news broadcast, and I'm getting texts from friends, oh my God, you got to come back, you got to come back. People were in their fear. And I remember just like tuning in, like, I just got to Jordan, literally. And people were texting me going, you've got to come back. They're going to close the United States. Well, something in me said, I can be here and I'm going to do this trip because it was like a God thing. I felt like this whole journey was watched over, right? Because I was actually protected from going to certain places. I was redirected. I was like, all this stuff worked out, right? And what I know about when that's happening in my life, that everything just is flowing in the way it's supposed to flow, maybe not with rapid succession, maybe not completely easy. But I knew that you don't just land somewhere that your heart has called you to be and then have to turn around and go home. So I just decided I was going to do it. And by golly, I got back into San Francisco one day before shelter-in-place orders. The CDC was all set up at the airport. There was, chaos. And I just dealt with the chaos for when I got home. And what I know is I kept just paying attention. And I would ask the question, like, what should I do? What should I do now? And the what should I do was keep going in that moment. Now, if I got a really big message about turn around and go home, I probably would have done that.
Yeah.
But somehow I managed to tweak those, almost sneak those 3 days in, and I am so grateful. And there was all these other things that happened, Steve, that were quite amazing. Like literally there was a sandstorm on the way to Petra, literally a sandstorm. And I'm thinking, all right, God, I've come all this way. Now I got a sandstorm, you
Yeah.
know? And it was like, please just make the weather good so that I can walk into Petra, which is one of the most ancient sites in the world. So beautiful, thousands and thousands of years old. And by golly, the sun was shining that next day, and it lasted till about 2 p.m. when I walked all the way into Petra to the places I wanted to see, and then it started pouring rain, literally, like 2:30 in the afternoon. And I just came out, with a horse and carriage and sopping wet. Oh well,
Wow.
and a dream was fulfilled. And I do believe, because that dream was so beating in my heart, like, Petra is on my bucket list. And I sometimes think that if your dream is so big, somehow it's going to come true. And yes, there were bumps. There was a sandstorm we had to go through.
Right.
There was, they're going to close the United States, which was also all over the news, and all this kind of stuff, right? And I just went, somehow, I know in my heart that I'm to keep going. And I think you have to check in. I could have gone either way, truthfully, Steve. I could have gotten back on a plane and went, time to go home. Probably most people would have done that. Maybe I'm not so sane. I don't know. But what I do know is that I felt that I'd come this far, and I felt like there was sort of a God thing the whole way, that I've been protected and watched over and guided, and I follow that.
Well, and you said so many things there, and it's beautiful. It's because I believe this. And do you find this, like, I didn't always do this. Sometimes I would burn through the hotness, or like, go through the pain, that whole no gain, no pain thing that we've, many cultures have been brought up with. But I find now, when I'm in the bliss of where I'm supposed to go, it's when it all comes together. And the couple things that you said that I picked up on very specifically was, it was the exact same airfare that I was able to go to Jordan. It's like, okay, there's like, I look at those as little checkpoints or signs. Then you get there, and of course the person that picks you up is the person that gets you to the next step. And so all these things happen, and yeah, there's a sandstorm, but then it opens up, and even though it's wet, at least you weren't getting hit by sand, so like, so many things, maybe it wasn't exactly the way you wanted. And even back that up in the story, you weren't even planning to go there, although this was big time on your bucket list. So like, the universe almost conspired to say, nope, you're not going that way, nope, you're not going that way, go here. And it's like, opening up. It's kind of like the, that alignment, and you were able to see that. And yes, this is probably years and years of practice, but I just had to dissect from my experience. But do you find the same, like, when things are in alignment, then it just goes smooth? Is that how that it seems like that's part of your indication to keep going?
Absolutely. Things are in alignment. But I'll tell you honestly, they weren't in as great an alignment. Was there disappointment when the travel agent called me and said, "Oh, sorry, you can't go on that cruise that we spent hours trying to figure out"? And I thought, oh, okay, now what am I going to do? And then plan B. Okay, I'm going to go overland. I'm going to take an airplane there. And then, I pay attention to where the signals come in. That my travel agent, who, by the way, in the United States, hardly ever turns me against some things, said, "I don't think that's a wise idea." And I'm like, okay, I hear that, right? And so you got to have trusted advisors. In my case, he's one of my trusted advisors.
Right.
So paying attention to who you can ask, right, and who's a trusted advisor, and who's smart enough to kind of tune into the right things for you versus the fear storms of what's going on. I couldn't believe how much fear was here when I landed, because of course, being outside the United States, it's different, right? And the perceptions are different. And I laugh with my friend because I go, hey, Jordan only had one case. I guess I could hang out the Dead Sea for 3 months if worse comes to worse.
Right,
Right?
right. Well, and you're definitely, see, that's where you're constantly looking at, well, what if this happens? Okay, can I deal with that? It's just a tremendous mindset that you have, and it's beautiful, and I admire it.
Thank
And
you.
I'm just, I'm curious, was it always this way for you? And if it wasn't, like, do you remember how things started to shift for you? Like, was there a turning point where you started to make your life easier or more in alignment with what you want versus, what it was before?
Yeah, it was never this way, actually. I grew up as a struggler, a warrior. I always like to say I come from a long line of warriors.
Yeah.
No kidding. I mean, my family thinks I'm a little crazy, in the sense that they never quite understood me, because I was always an adventurer for sure. And seeking a better way. I came from a family that didn't really see a lot of possibilities. I was the first one to graduate college. I just always had this part of me that was not like my family. I probably was what they might call the black sheep, but I wouldn't quite call myself that. And so my answer is no. I was, kind of fell into that family lineage and pattern, meaning I had to really work on myself. I had to find myself. I had to take courses and work with coaches and go deep within, so that I released some of my trauma, some of the past. Okay, let's say all the past as much as possible.
Right.
Listen, there's still moments, believe me, I'm not Pollyanna and everything's perfect. And even on this journey, I sat there in Jordan going, oh my God, what am I doing here? Maybe I really should go home. This is a little crazy. Then the others, it's like that movie where they go, well, if, and then that,
Hmm.
and you're kind of going both sides. But what I know is I am practiced enough. And, when they say spiritual practice, they're not kidding.
Right.
It
Right.
is practice. I wish I could say everything is so natural and quick. No, it isn't. I struggle at times. I get a little down at times. I have to recreate myself at times is how I see it. I remember waking up, I don't know, it was a week ago, and all of a sudden I was like, all this fear was coming over me and feeling things. Sometimes they're not my own, by the way. Sometimes they're other people's fears, and I'm highly sensitive. So I might be picking up things. And so I woke up and I felt this, I call them a fear storm, right? And I went, okay, all right, I'm feeling this fear storm. Now, what can I do? All right, let's see. I'm going to walk outside. I'm going to walk outside for 10 minutes. Like I give myself 10-minute things to do because I know it won't overwhelm me. And so, all right, let's walk outside for 10 minutes. Let's smell the air. All right, good. All right, starting to calm down. Good. What next? And I'll take it in like, what's next? What's next?
Yeah.
And if I have to, I'll go take a long bath. I am finding the self-care is so key. And
Yeah.
and as I've taken better care of self, it's amazing how many other things are better taken care of. And I think there's a point where you have to put self first. And when I say self first, this is not selfish. This is like, what does self need so that self can give to others, right?
Right.
And I found before I would give from cup half empty. I would give from cup exhausted.
Right. Right.
um, and I'm not
Yep.
saying that doesn't still happen times. Listen, we're human and things happen, and sometimes our schedules are full and we're tired, and all of these things are true, right? So the question is like, maybe what's one thing I'll do during those exhaustion days? Well, I take a dance class online right now every morning at 9. That means I'm not talking to anyone else till my
Yep.
dance class is finished. And boy, that starts my day differently. And I think these things we have in our schedule, including for me, it's a date with me, what do I
Yeah.
need to do? That's the part where I say take care of self, and then
Right.
we get to take care of others.
It's so true. If someone's thirsty and you want to give them water, but your cup or your pitcher of water is empty, then it's then there's nothing more to give. But if you can take care, when you take care of yourself, then that can be replenished, and then you have more water to quench more thirst, using the metaphor there. But it's so true. And often we look at that as being selfish. I do remember when I first started meditating, I was still working way too many hours, and my wife and my son was born already, so we were starting to be parents. And my wife looks at me, she's like, really? You're going to start meditating now? Like, one more thing to not be around us, because I was definitely a more workaholic guy at that time. And I had to veto it, even though it was painful for the moment. I had to look at my wife and say, yes, I think I really need to do this. And after doing that, it actually made the turn for me, because then I started to reflect more, be calmer more, not as quick to anger or snappiness and all these things. And so months later, I think it was less than 6 months, I remember my son was quite young. We're having a brunch on a Sunday. And that was the hardest time actually for me. Like, during work days, it was easy for me to fit the meditation in because I had a ritual. Then on the weekend, I would slack off. So on a Sunday, I'm sitting there and my son just looked over at me while we're eating. And he said, "Dad, did you meditate today?" And
Oh,
then I said, "No." And he said, "Yeah, I can tell."
wow.
And then my wife looked at me and she said, "Me too." And then after that, it was a whole turn at the table, because it was like, "Hey, Steve, I think you should go meditate." So it's the opposite of like, "Hey, you're going to add this in your life." They started to notice. And then I started to notice. Now, Jill, it's been over 10 years of meditating every day. And it's like you said, it's a practice. It didn't start out that smooth. Even now, are there a day that I'll miss? Even now, maybe it is, but I'll tell you, it's way less, because so practice it's not normal anymore to miss that. But it fills up my cup, and then I have so many more resources for being a husband, for being a father, for helping my clients, because I filled it up first, right?
Absolutely. I mean, my meditation's at 8:30 every morning, right? And then if I have something else, then I'll move it to 8, but it stays first in the morning, and then that dance class, and then I serve people, right? And I am having a blast. Now, I have to tell you, it took a pandemic to get me to pay attention to that. And I purposely am saying this because, and the truth is, I've always been a possibility person and always been a wonderful adventure and all these things. But what I noticed with the pandemic and the slowing down, supposedly, that although I'm not that much slower,
Right, right.
is
I'm not
that what
I know I jumped on you there, but I'm not either. Like, I'm still active, but the reflection. So go back onto this. Sorry about that.
No, that's okay. No, what I mean is that my schedule is still full, and it's more full of me putting me in. And so what I notice is my first hour and a half of my day, let's call it, or at least the first hour before I start connecting and talking to everybody, is full. I filled myself back up with meditation and dance, in this case, and how powerful that is. And you know what? In the evening, what I did was I boxed myself in, because I saw like what this could do if I went into fear, or I had days that were unstructured. And then at 6 o'clock, I've got other things that fill my soul. I listen to singing bowls, there's a woman who plays harp, and there's all these beautiful things that are right now going on, and that I am enjoying and putting in my life. And it's been wonderful. I feel really like this was what's that expression? Icing on the cake.
Right.
It's sort of a funny thing to say, but this COVID stuff is forced for me, putting the icing on the cake, because it's forced me literally to slow down in a way that I put me in. And that's a beautiful thing. And then now I feel so much more able to serve in an even better way than before to my clients, and be a better friend, and all those wonderful things, right? That I always want to do anyway.
It's so beautiful to hear. And I think it's just a great reminder for everyone. When you take care of you, you have so much more to give. I want to back up again, because you said that it wasn't always this way, and you moved away from some patterns that were in your family, that lineage. At what can you remember, if we slow down time a little bit, in that moment, was there like an actual moment? Was it an I know there was an evolution. I could tell, because and I've done the same. You have this long, and it's still happening, right? We're still learning. But
Always.
what was that? If you can identify the turning point moment that made the biggest shift, where you're like, you know what, it doesn't have to be this way for me. Like, what made you choose to invest in yourself in such a way?
Oh, it probably in my probably mid-20s, I found a personal growth workshop, and I remember taking that, and especially looking at family stuff and crying through things and going, "Wow," And I think it started there, and then kept evolving, right? Because here's the truth, and you said it, Steve. We do not. I hope we don't stop, right? We're
Right.
always evolving. I always say your publicity is always evolving because you're evolving, right?
Right.
And for all of us, our journey continues. So absolutely, I'm learning all the time. I'm growing all the time, and I'm a committed and dedicated learner and grower and student of life,
Yeah.
as well as a teacher. And I'm grateful to be both. But let me tell you, in my mid-20s, I was a hot mess, probably into my 30s still. And I'm just looking at really the thing that saved me. It was my spiritual work and my growth in that realm, and my personal work and my willing to go to therapy work and
Yeah.
all of that piece, I think, is actually what saved me. And I'm so grateful. And I think it's really, as I reflect on that, really probably took me till my definitely mid-20s to start waking up and pay
Yeah.
attention to, it doesn't have to be like this, and I don't have to be like this. And then, still evolving, still evolving, still evolving. Now finding the parts of my feminine self, because I've been kicking it in a career for so long, right?
Right.
And
Right.
and that takes a lot of masculine energy and a lot of forward energy to put oneself out in one's career. And I have 4 books and all the work and effort it took to do that, and to speak in front of people. All of that
Right.
is masculine out energy. And as a woman, so now I'm finding my feminine and
Yeah.
finding more my soft. And I think for men, guess what, you got the same issue now. You got to find your feminine too, right?
Absolutely. It's so, we have so many parallels in that, and especially like redefining business as a woman, because came during a period of time where, business was looked at as a and there is, like, you're right. If you just look at the essence of masculinity and femininity, then, masculine is that doing, and, that where there's so much more expression of love coming from the feminine. So in that essence, you can see that. But even just in the public awareness, we've moved, still to this day, moving away from, what was this only a man thing, to now. So, even during even these last 20, 30 years, you've had to look a certain part to be in that play, which we don't have to do now. So it's beautiful that you're saying that you're finding your service to the world. You're still working, but bringing that mix of the masculine and feminine, and we both have it. Like, so for me, I definitely was way more masculine, shielding myself from all the hurt and stuff from a young age, and then not letting my heart be out there. And as I went through the personal growth, much like you, I opened, and just echoing this, I had to open myself up, like you said, be open and vulnerable and go through that therapy. But for me too, it was the same thing. I fell into the patterns of my family, and I could look at like 4 generations at least that I know of doing these repeated patterns. And then it took working on me and be willing. And so ultimately, to break it down, what I found was, I thought personal growth was becoming better, which there is that, right? You're doing better things in the world or for yourself. But ultimately, what I found personal growth was letting all of that armor that I was protecting myself with go, so that I could actually let my heart be open, because you're so afraid to be hurt, right? And so then you feel no love, and it gets worse and worse and worse and worse. So it takes courage, to be vulnerable. Like, a lot of people, especially like being a man during the time of my growing up, it was like, if you cried, then you weren't being a man, and all these things. And ultimately, it was that for me to find myself. And I think it's more courage to allow that vulnerability than the opposite. And so I guess just, bringing that back to you, and I guess I'm just reinforcing on this story, that it was courageous. Like you took that and you worked through the things that were hard, and what had happened to become the woman that you are now. And so I know I have a lot to be grateful for. I'm glad I went through that. I don't regret any of it, because I wouldn't be who I am right now, so.
Absolutely. I mean, realistically, God bless my parents. They weren't great parents, and I love them. They did the best they could. I know that now. Does that mean it hurt any less to have a mother who was neglectful and different things that I had to deal with? No, it didn't hurt any less, and I had to deal with all of that. And I think that as we expand in who we are, and find other ways to fill our holes, so to speak. I mean, I think
Right.
we all have holes somewhere. If
Oh yeah.
unless I don't know anyone who's had a perfect childhood, and if you do, let me know, because I'd like to talk to them.
Yeah, well, and it's interesting because even we just said, it just came back to that metaphor. We were talking about the glass half full or empty, right? Exhausted. But I look at that with my parents too. My dad was a workaholic and absent, and then my mom was depressed that he was never there, and so then she was emotionally absent, and so they didn't. But I came to that same thing. I was upset, especially with my mom. We didn't get along, and so there was resentment especially in my 20s, like you brought up. I was definitely having that. But I've learned through all this work, I'm like, oh my gosh, of course she couldn't give me any water. She had none for herself, so
That's right. That's right.
ultimately our parents, I'm in the same, so I have just tremendous love for my parents. They gave every bit that they could, and it does suck that it was just a little bit, at that moment, but we're all there. And so, and I haven't found that person having the perfect life either. Like, it doesn't matter if you have money or you have no money, if you have this or that, everyone's pain is at whatever their pain level of 10 is, it's still 10, so.
That's right. And it's our journey, each one of us, right? For whatever we have to learn. And I think the biggest thing is to have compassion for each other. As I see people react in certain ways as adults, I know that typically that's caused from some kind of pain. Some kind of pain they had, somebody's unkind. Listen, I wrote a book on kindness, and it's been interesting reflecting on that. Even as I interviewed people for The Profit of Kindness, like really, like what happened in them that they became kinder, right? And it's often because they were abused, or there was some serious neglect in their life, or something, right? And listen, I don't think you have to go through all that to find your way, but I do think that life is a journey, and that it is important to find your way, whatever that way is, whatever you believe. It's all beautiful. I'm all for all things that lead to love, and that are on the path of love and light. But as far as I'm concerned, each person does have their own path and their own way to find, and that it's okay, and that even if they're not finding it yet, part of that sometimes is we got to have compassion and willingness to kind of be with people who aren't that easy to be with at times, if you know what I mean.
Absolutely. Well, and this is so beautiful the way this conversation is going. I'm curious to go back one more time. Like, so when you decided to take that personal growth workshop, and you said that was a pivotal point, can you let your mind go back to that moment? What told you to do that, or what piqued your curiosity? Like, maybe I know you were curious. I get that about how you told your story, but what allowed you in that moment to say, you know what, I should do this? Do you remember by chance?
I think part of it was I just didn't want to be so sad anymore. And and there was a lot of depression. There still continues to be, by the way. My brother's in 24-hour care and actually mentally ill,
Oh,
for
sorry.
his whole life. And he's in his mid-50s now. So there's a lot of mental illness in my family and a lot of depression. And I knew that I didn't want to go that way. And I could feel that if I stayed in the path I would go that way.
Yeah.
And it's not to say that at times I haven't felt depressed in my life, because I have,
Right.
or that like a little bit hopeless at times, because I have. So I just also want, you to hear and people to hear that's not like, oh, one day I woke up and everything was great. I still have
Right.
everything
Right.
everybody has to deal with, which sometimes is hopelessness, a feeling of it, not necessarily true, by the way, or depression for whatever reason, or sadness, or whatever negative emotion you feel. Some people are anger, resentment, other things, right? Um, but for me, and by the way, anger too, because I think, any person who hasn't had a good childhood will feel some anger at that. And so I think there was that moment, like an opportunity presented itself, some part of my soul. And I think sometimes our soul is what has us do things versus our intellect, or even well, this seems like a good choice.
Right. Right.
So I think just something had me say yes, and what I've learned to pay attention to, it even showed up on this last trip, right, was what's saying yes in me. And so there I was in Egypt and Jordan and the COVID virus, and something kept saying, yes, keep going. Yes, keep going. It's okay. You're going to be okay. Right?
Right.
Even in the midst of the fear, even in the midst of things coming down big time,
Yeah.
I just knew the answer is yes. Same thing within my 20s. Something said yes.
It's so beautiful, and thanks for sharing, because sometimes it's hard for us to listen to our feelings, especially, a lot of times many families you grow up and where they're even taught not to ignore their feelings, like stop feeling that, just do this, and going into that logic mind. And so I definitely am with you. I encourage people to notice their feelings. It's like the nerve endings on our hand. If you go towards something hot, it wants to pull away because it's trying to help you. And we have those feelings even in decision making. I think that those can be ignored. So I think this is a great story for people to be reminded, hey, if you're feeling something, pay attention to it. And then, I always have to say, the discernment between that and fear, because so what I do, and we'd love to hear your words on this. If I check in and then I'm not feeling good about it, then I'm like, okay, is it fear, or do I really not feel good? Is it like not feeling good? And sometimes it's fear. And then I'm like, okay, go try it out. Because usually that fear, when I ask more questions to myself, it's because I don't know where I'm going, right? It's that unknown. And so then we get, that's the human nature, right? You sometimes can fear the unknown. So then then I'll press forward. And if it feels really uncomfortable, or like we were talking about earlier in this podcast, everything's coming at you and it's hard to go that way, then it's like, wait a minute, maybe I shouldn't. But that's what, when people that don't listen to their feelings, and here we're bringing that up a lot today, so I just thought I'd bring that up. Like, how do you know between the difference between those feelings that should be like a no or leading you to the yes versus a fear? Do you have any comments on that?
Sometimes I don't actually know. Sometimes I'm a bit rolling the dice. I mean,
Okay.
I'll take Jordan and Egypt, right? And so something in me said, okay, get on the plane, go to Jordan, because I think this is your moment. You're in this part of the world, and let's go. This has been on your bucket list. Let's go. And I have to tell you, there was a part of me that was a little afraid, like, all right, are you sure? Maybe you should go home. Like, this is a major virus outbreak. People are freaking out. Maybe you should go home. And I just kept going, well, no, so it's a little bit logic, it's a little bit emotion, it's a little bit fear, it's a little bit seeing what's the biggest piece of that puzzle. And even that first night in Jordan, I remember being in Amman and being this beautiful temple where Moses stood. And I mean, I was having these incredible experiences, right? And I feel very blessed to have been there. And I do think I felt very like somehow I'm being protected. Somehow it's going to be okay. Even in the midst of the fear storm, even in the midst of thinking, it doesn't mean the thoughts didn't keep popping in. Maybe I should go back. I don't know. I'm a little scared. And I remember my sister sent me a text going, I really think you ought to get back immediately. And
Right.
and I
Yeah.
remember texting her saying, please don't let your fear interfere in with me. Something like that, right?
Yeah. Yeah. Yeah.
And she even sent it back. She goes, I'm not meaning to do that, but I will tell you, there's a lot of news here
I
about
get.
XYZ, right? And so it's always interesting because then there's other people's opinions.
Right, right. And they care. It's not like your sister was trying to ruin your holiday. She
Right.
was only doing it, if you look at the deepest level, it was because, hey, it's like, I care about you, being careful. And yet, they don't know, and this goes to all of it, right? No one knows exactly what's going on for us, except
Right.
for
And
us.
and by the way, her text was filled with fear. I mean, and that's okay. That was her perception. And it was, and it's, there's a thing about whatever you think, you're right. Right.
Absolutely.
Everybody's got their perception, their thoughts. So my thought was, I'm safe here in Jordan. There's only one confirmed case. I'm okay. Her thought was, you better get home.
Right.
So we're both right. We're both right. And either way, there's probably some truth to both. There's probably some falsehoods in both, all that good stuff. Right. And I think sometimes you just got to roll your own inner dice and see where it lands. And sometimes we don't know. Sometimes we're taking the gamble. And I took a gamble. I know that. And the gamble turned out to be okay.
Right.
So
Well, and I
I'm
mean,
grateful.
I'm with you, and I could see all the gratefulness, and just saying it out loud, just hearing your story. I mean, you could have contracted an illness in Jordan, but then you can easily do it here, just getting from the airport to the other. I mean, we were traveling too. We got back. I think I got back like 3 days before you did, and
Wow.
so we were in Africa and Europe, and you
Wow.
know part of me was thinking the opposite too, because we were getting texts from family too. What are you doing? Oh my gosh, and then it's also, my mind was like, the best place to stay away from probably is the travel places, right? So like, in one way, just staying where we were was it could be a better option than getting on planes and all of that. So I mean, there's so many ways to choose, and so many different ways to break this up, and I 100% believe in what you're saying. Whatever we think about, believe, comes about, right? I mean, it's
Well, right.
so yeah.
And then sometimes shit happens, right?
Yeah.
And just something happens. Listen, I was in Canada and fell over a curb and broke both ankles in multiple places and
Oh
ended
my
up
God.
in a wheelchair for 6 months. All right. So
Wow.
who knows why that happened, except I like to say that God stopped me in my tracks, right? I was on the way to a speaking engagement. Instead of speaking, I went to the emergency room in Canada, and was abroad while this happened, which was not an easy thing, by the way. And they wouldn't let me back on the plane because I couldn't walk and all kinds
Oh
of
my gosh.
other complications. So that happened, right? And who would have seen that coming? And I had to literally had a caregiver for 6 months. I could not do things on my own. And I think, stuff happens in our lives, right? And for me, that was also a time where I had to go within, where I had to look and see what was the meaning of this. Why was I stopped, slowed down? What happened? All of that stuff. And I just think things happen in our lives, good, bad, up, down, all around. And one needs to learn to ride the somewhat the merry-go-round of life, the roller coaster of life. And I think the more you can do that, it's not like it flattens out, because I don't know that it does. I don't know. Maybe it does. I'm not sure.
Right.
But what I do know is the journey gets a lot better, a lot more joyful, a lot easier. And that I know as I've relaxed into the flow, so to speak. I remember another good analogy for me is like rowing the boat versus like just going on the boats on the current of the river.
Right.
So I think you got to do a little of both, right? You got to ride the current of the river, and you got to steer occasionally. I think you got to do both. Not like sometimes I was steering too much in my life, trying to paddle hard and get somewhere and do something and obtain something and create a goal. And funny enough, I don't know, about 4 or 5 years ago, maybe 4 years, I then decided I was going to like give up goals. All right, I'm giving up goals. I'm just going to flow with life, and I'm going to see what calls me, and I'm going to see where my heart is led. And guess what? That was great, and now I'm a little bit in between. Like I still create things I want to accomplish and create. But you know what? Instead now, Steve, I call it my I want list. What do I want? Not what my goal is, but what do I want? And so if I go in the direction of what I want, I'm finding that I'm going to pretty much get my goals. You can substitute the word goals, but I now call it my I want list. And I really look at that. What do I want? Well, okay, I want to make X amount of dollars every year. Great. I want a certain amount of books and a certain amount of clients. Great. I want to create a kindness circle. Great. And so all of these some are business ones, some are personal ones, some are travel ones, whatever it is. That's the list I work off of now. And that's been, for me, a really good redirection.
It's so beautiful. Like I'm just keep sitting here interested. It's like we're playing a little ping pong back and forth here, because what I found is when I made too stringent of goals, then I would be dictating like what road I was on. And so I use the metaphor of a road, but then all of a sudden the road that I'm on has potholes, my car's getting damaged, going down a really tough time. And ultimately it wasn't the goal that was causing that, it was the path that I had created, because I was like, this is the way I'm going to do it. So I like this idea of what do I want list instead of my goal list, because you're kind of putting the want there, and it puts a little less I guess you didn't necessarily say this, so maybe I'm adding it, but it puts a little less detail in the path, and knowing that you're going to get there, but you're going to find a way. And that's what I've found. There's always another way. And so it's not that we give up on our goals, or like you said, give up on what you want, but the way that you get there, that can change a whole bunch of times, but you'll find your way there. Going back to your Jordan story that has happened right now this year is amazing. That the fact that that's on your bucket list, there was no intent when you originally left your house that you were going to go there, and then you ticked that box, you checked it off, and it was not the way you planned. In fact, you didn't really plan it. It wasn't a goal for a month ago or 2 months ago. You still got what you want because it was on your want list. Am I congruent with what you were saying?
That's exactly what I'm saying. And I think there's a point where the goals become too tight. And I remember a coach said to me, I said, I want $1 million business. And he looked at me and goes, well, why? And I'm like, okay, I don't know. Somebody once told me maybe you should have $1 million business. All right, well, that sounds good. But truthfully, it wasn't actually. Yeah, it sounds good in theory. It does. And it sounded good to say it. And, it seems like it should be something I'm going after. But did I really want it? Like it really had to make me sit back and go, wow, what, is that true? And the other truth is that I wasn't making that goal. And so if I made 100,000 that year, I would never feel enough.
Right. Then you're dissatisfied.
Right. And so even though in my mind, yes, I wanted $1 million business, maybe I was at 100,000, and maybe then it went to 150, but I was still always a failure, which, by the way, that's, there's nothing wrong with that. What's wrong with that number of 100,000, 150, 50,000, wherever it is that makes you happy, that gives you what you want in life, that, takes care of your needs and more, and has you have some fun, whatever that number is. But I kept feeling like a failure because I realized my number was too high, just in this example, and that I wouldn't make it. And then I'd always feel like a failure. How ridiculous is that?
Well, yeah, and what is the number? So I love the question, what will having that do for you? And I learned that from one of my mentors, Carl Buchheit. It's an NLP question. What will having that do for you? So like anytime I want something, or even if I am setting some wish list or goal or whatever word you want to put on it, like, you want to make $1 million. Okay, what will having that do for you? And then the answer leads to like what you thought that $1 million would do. A funny story, I would meet up with this other coach speaker from at events here and there. Like we would end up speaking at the same event, and this happened, and I hadn't seen him in a little over a year. And I was like, oh, so what happened in the last year? He's like, I was helping this client here in South Africa, and I got to spend time on his yacht, and then I'm in Sydney doing this, and he's telling me all these great stories, and he goes on and on, and then he turns to me, he's like, yeah, but you remember I told you my goal was to hit $1 million in annual revenue. And he said, I didn't. And he's getting like all bummed out, gloomy. You could see the gray cloud coming over him, and then he, and then I said, oh, well, when you have that $1 million, what will having that do for you? And he's like, oh, well, then I'll, travel, go on yacht. Like he literally like named all the things off. And I was like, wait a minute. I started scratching my head and I said, wait a minute, can we go back in our conversation just 1 second? Didn't you tell me, what did you do this year? And then I didn't have to say anything more. He just went, oh my gosh, I'm actually living the things I want that are on the want list, right? Without doing that. And so then I just quickly said, so do you really need $1 million in annual revenue? And like you said, he's making multiple six figures. So he's still living like a really good life. I mean, you're talking, that's still like, I don't know that the newest statistic, but last time I looked, you're in the top 3% of earners in the United States, right? Definitely in the top 5%. So it's like, okay, what are we really talking about here? And he goes, you're right. I don't need the $1 million as long as I'm getting what I want. And I remember it was like a huge epiphany for him. And it's exactly what you're saying here, and I think often we do this. We put a number or a career position, and this goes back to your point about the word goals. We set this thing because it either sounds good or someone told us to do it, oh, go be a doctor, son, whatever it is. And then we didn't ask ourselves, well, why do I want this? Or what will having this do for me? Oh, it'll make my mom happy. Or, oh, my neighbors will think I'm cool. Like what is it? And then when you get to the root of that, oh my gosh, then life becomes fulfilled. Then your heart becomes fulfilled. So I think these are so many beautiful stories. Jill,
listen, I went, thank you. And I love that story too. And I went to, just share with you, I went to law school because I always wanted to be a lawyer, right? Because I grew up thinking if I'm a lawyer, I will be able to solve problems, like have, real world ways to solve problems. And I've always been a committed person to helping the world, right? And so I saw that as a path to do that with. And frankly, nobody in my family had gone to college, so I thought that would be a super accomplishment. Well, and then I got to law school, Steve, and I went, oh my God, I hate this. because for me and my creative mind, it was really hard. It was not the right place for me. And I felt like a failure. And I felt like, oh my gosh, what, and I remember I got sick that year, and I got sick 5 times. And I figured it was God's way of telling me, get out, because you really aren't supposed to be here. And so I did. I dropped out of law school. Now, let me tell you, that was a disappointment to my father. That was a disappointment to me. But, interestingly enough, it put me on the right path of where I was supposed to be, with a little bit of zig and zag. And I just think, sometimes we get this stuff in our mind about what we're supposed to do. And sometimes by doing that, you will find the right path anyway, right?
Right.
And yet, and that getting off that path is actually what drove me to my right path of publicity and helping others and writing books and training and speaking and all of these wonderful things that I've done. But I do think there's some things that get in our brain about what we're supposed to do. And I think if we learn anything, maybe we could drop some of those things, what we're supposed to do, because as I'm sure you feel too, as I follow, it sounds a little corny, but as I follow my heart, or the inspiration, those little voices you hear, like, turn that way, go that way, take this route, that's the places that I'm meant to be, really.
It's so beautiful. And, I know we could say it's cliche, and you and I both could say it, but it's been said so many times, and our elders and all kinds of people in the world are saying, follow your heart. I mean, even Steve Jobs said, after all he accomplished at the end of his life, he was saying, I wish I would have spent more time with love. It's so many people, they're screaming at us to do this. So I think it's never, for me, it's never too cliche to hear that. And I think it's a great way to end, because we're all these great stories are coming to the end here on our time today. But I'm curious, like, if somebody's there, if you can answer, if there is a quick answer to this, like, what would be the first thing you would recommend someone, if they're feeling that they're, maybe they've been ignoring their feelings, or their heart has been saying to do something, but they've been doing that supposed to thing. Is there like a first step, or what do they do if they don't know what to do? They're kind of paralyzed in that moment, because so many of us have been there. I know I have, and you probably have had moments like that. Is there some little quick thing that you would recommend? Well,
I think the first thing is to listen to what is the brain saying. Is it a supposed to? Like, which is leading the show here? Is it your heart or is it your head? And by the way, I think the head should also lead. I do, because I think, you got to be smart in the way you live life, and you got to think things through logistically sometimes and figure out all
Right.
that. The head is very good for. And but I do think I think the biggest thing is a bit of a check-in. Really just stop yourself for 5 minutes. Set a timer if you have to, because I know I've had to set
Yeah.
timers and actually force myself, I'm not kidding, to sit down and to reflect for a moment. What's really driving this show? Is it old programming? Is it who I am now? Is it a thought I had that's fleeting that somebody said would be a good idea for me? Is it my idea? Is it my heart's idea? I don't, figure that out. I'm starting kindness circles with the Prophet of Kindness book. This started in my heart about, a year and a half ago. Like, oh, I want to do circles, kindness circles, I call them. I want to do kindness circles. I couldn't figure out how to monetize it. I couldn't figure out like how it would work. And then all of a sudden, when I came home, funny enough, from Jordan, Egypt, I'm like, this is it. This is the moment. It's going to start now. Even though a year and a half ago, I thought, oh, I want to do, I should do, watch
Right.
that word should, right? I
Right.
should do kindness circles. And then all of a sudden, it's like, yes, I'm doing kindness circles. It was a moment. It was flat. It was focused. It was no nonsense. It was here. And then all of a sudden I got a meeting planner to say, okay, I'm going to do them with you, right? Like, boom, everything
Beautiful.
started going.
Alignment, alignment, alignment.
Alignment.
It's so beautiful. And, I think you're completely right. It is teamwork, mind and heart. And, we need both. We wouldn't, I really don't think our bodies would have been given both of those if we didn't need them both. It's kind of, like tonsils and adenoids. When I was a kid, they took them out everywhere. Like mine were inflamed. They took them out. Come to find out, I was allergic to eucalyptus, and my mom was feeding me Halls every time I got sick. Of course, they were
Oh,
inflamed. It was
oh,
trying to do what it was. Basically, what I'm saying is, it was supposed to be there, and it was trying to do the job that it was there to do. And so I think beautiful thing, to check in on both, because if you ignore one or the other, if you let the heart scream and then don't put, now you still had to do some things, you're making some phone calls, you're doing things to have these kindness circles, so that becomes the logic side, but your heart was telling you to do it. So
well, and
so
if I may,
beautiful.
let me add
Yeah.
the third one, the gut.
Yeah.
So, mind, heart, gut, right?
Yes.
Sometimes you'll just have a gut reaction, do this, go there, and follow whatever seems the loudest, the
Yes.
loudest.
That's it. And that comes, it's a great place to wrap up on, the thing, because we all know, I mean, the reason that you set on this quest and you went through your personal illness, you in your way, your body was screaming out like, go do something, you can have something different. And I found that too, like, there was something inside me after everything. There was a period of time when I thought, oh, this is life and it's hard and it sucks and this is the way it is. But then something started screaming out of me, you have a choice, you have a choice. And I remember the day that I realized I wanted to run in the street with pots and pans, go, you can choose, you can choose. And it was that loud inside of me. I didn't do that, but I think to your loudness. So it's a great place to end on that. It's like where we're feeling it the loudest, follow and seek that, and be willing to change, the flexibility where it is. So it's so beautiful. I'm so happy that we had this conversation, and I think there's so many stories people can take away, and I hope that everyone listening, if one of these stories helps you make a decision in your life, then obviously I think the time was worth it. Jill, thank you so much.
Thank you. It's a delight to be here.
And quickly, if people want to reach out to you, or because I know you're in PR and all, and you're also now again trusting your heart in a different place, doing kindness circles. If someone wants, what's the best way for people to find you?
Thank you. Well, go to jilllublin.com and jilllublin.com/publicity. Great way to find me, and you'll be getting lots of great PR tips just for you and putting yourself out there. And hopefully you can spell it out for people on the show notes, but it's jilllublin.com/publicity.
Absolutely. We'll definitely put that in the notes, and so people can easily click and get there. So thank you so much again, Jill, for being on the show.
Thank you.
Thanks for listening to the More Business, More Life podcast. I hope you got value. And if you did, we have so many more things for you at stevenapolitan.com. You'll be able to connect with us on social media. We are active. You can ask us questions. And then on top of that, I want to give you a really big gift. And it truly is. We want to give so much value. We have an offering. It's a program called Clear Path to Customers. It's the same way that we attract wow clients and only working with the right people, the people we want to. And it's transformed my business into millions more in revenue with the right people and my clients. And we're doing it absolutely free. So you can go to stevenapolitan.com and grab that. You just got to put in your information. We'll send it to you promptly. And that again is on stevenapolitan.com. I look forward to having you on the next show. Until then, remember, choose gratitude and create freedom.